Just a quick announcement for those of you that were not here in the second service last week. We have a new student pastor, so you heard him preach last week, and it was a overwhelming vote there. And so Tyler Dover is here. This is his first official Sunday here. Last week was sort of his final job interview, I guess you might say. So had his first Wednesday night this past week. And so if you didn't get a chance to speak to Tyler last week, be sure and speak to him. He's wearing the nice Clemson shirt there. So I can appreciate that. So I just wanted to fill you in if you haven't heard yet. So it's exciting. Continue to be in prayer for that. You prayed for the process. Now pray for him as he gets his feet on the ground and begins to get things moving in the right direction. So today we are going to finish our summer series, Tackling Tough Questions. It is perfect timing, really, because isn't fall next week? I think like the 20th or 22nd or something like that. So we'll finish our summer series just before fall kicks off. And then next Sunday, we're going to start in 2 Peter. So we finished 1 Peter back at the end of May, and then we'll move into 2 Peter, because when are you going to come back to 2 Peter? It's one of those small little books, and might as well do it when you're in 1 Peter. I preached 1 John about 4 or 5 years ago here, and then I always regretted I didn't just go ahead and do 2nd and 3rd John, because I can't think of a time I'm going to come back to those two. So we'll go to 2 Peter. But the last question that we have been looking at, and this will be the third week that we've looked at it, is this. It's in the blink of an eye, in the presence of the Lord, will we be with a new body, physical form, or will we be a spirit? Do we get a new body when Jesus returns, or do we return with Jesus with a new body? Great question, but the way that I approached this was through the lens of life after death. And so the first message we started with was to look at life. What is the nature of human life? And we said that human life is the coming together of body and spirit or soul, that physical part of us and that immaterial part of us. Life is the joining together of those two things. That was the key thing to remember from that both of those matter. And then 2 weeks ago, we looked at death and what happens when the Christian dies. We looked at the intermediate state, which is what we call heaven. And so if life then is the bringing together, it's the joining together of that spirit with that body, then death is the separation of those two things. Death is where your spirit or your soul is separated from your body. Your body then goes into the ground to decay, but our spirit goes into heaven in the presence of the Lord. And so today we're going to come to where all of that culminates, because I think for so many Christians, including myself, we really didn't have an understanding of what I'm talking about today growing up. We sort of conflated it all together and kind of just put it under the category of life after death, or going to heaven when you die, dying, going to heaven, whatever that might be, knowing that there is a resurrection, but really just sort of keeping that at the back of our minds rather than at the forefront. But what we're looking at today is really the culmination not only of this question or this little study. It's the culmination of the whole Bible. This is what the whole Bible culminates with. It is the place on the other side of the in-between. That on this side, where we are right now, it's our mortal life. That's where every one of us is living. We're moving towards death, and unless Jesus comes back first, all of us are going to get there. There's nothing that can prevent us from getting to that place of death. And then you have that in-between, that intermediate place that we looked at 2 weeks ago. But then on the other side of that, you have what I like N.T. Wright calls it. He calls it life after death. So you have the eternal state. If heaven is that intermediate state for us, then what we're talking about today is that eternal state. And I want to do a real quick contrast just based on some of the categories that I talked about in regards to heaven, to show you the contrast between that intermediate state and that eternal state. We said that the intermediate state is immediate. It happens upon death, right? There's not some delay. It happens immediately when we die. We depart and be with Christ. We are absent from the body and present with the Lord. We are today, Jesus said, you will be with me in paradise. It's immediate. Well, the eternal is not immediate. It's something you have to wait on. Even the people we're waiting on it, but even the people in heaven currently in the presence of God, they are also waiting on that eternal state. This is even the martyrs expressing, how long, O Lord, how long? Until you bring it all together, until everything culminates, till you finally bring us to that eternal state that we're waiting on. The second thing we see is that the intermediate is temporary, but the eternal is forever. Right? It's forever. It's never going to end. Third, the intermediate state is incomplete. We said that we're missing a body. Doesn't mean bad, just incomplete. We're missing our bodies, but the eternal state is going to be complete. It will be absolute and perfect and satisfying and fulfilling in every single way. And then fourth, the intermediate is going to be, or is incomparable to life in this world. But the eternal state, I'm going to say it's familiar. It's familiar to us. And this is where it really gets good to me. This is where it gets good to me. Because I don't know about you, and please hear me the right way. I hope I express myself the right way. When I say this, I have a hard time just getting super excited about heaven, the intermediate state. And that's not because it's a bad thing, right? We said that. Heaven is wonderful. Paul said heaven is far better than life on this earth. So don't hear me the wrong way. I have a hard time getting excited about it, not because it's not going to be amazing, but because I don't understand it. I don't really understand it. This is what we talked about. When we talked about it, we said it's the incomparable nature of heaven. Why is it incomparable? But because we don't have the categories of understanding it. It's inexpressible. Paul said, I heard things that could not be expressed. And so I take it on faith because I trust God's word. I take it on faith that it's going to be far better than here, but I can't really grasp it. It'd be like someone trying to explain, Rachel, high-level calculus to me. You can explain it perfectly well, I'm sure, but I don't speak that language. I don't have categories for that. Really, let me just take it down to even more realistic. Low-level calculus, I can't understand. Geometry, I can't. Algebra 2, trigonometry, anything above like opening level algebra 1 is beyond me. And so if you explain it to me, I just have to take you at your word. I trust that you know what you're talking about. I trust that it actually means something and that it actually does, and that those things you're telling me are actually true. I trust that, but I don't have the language to understand it. It just doesn't make sense to me. And so that's the same here. I can't imagine what it's going to be like to exist with no body. That's hard for me to grasp. It's hard for me to understand what that would be like. It's hard for me to get what it would be like to experience a place like heaven apart from my 5 normal physical human senses. What might that be like? It's really hard to understand. But all I can do is, just like my math teacher, I just have to take God at his word that is a place that you want to go when you die. You want to be there when you die. But the eternal state is different from that. It's not that it's the exact same as right now, but there is, again, like I said, a familiarity about it. I think the way that I would put it, and I've heard it put this way before, is there is a continuity and there's a discontinuity between this life and that life. That there are things in our experience now, in this life, in this world, that are pointers to what it is going to be like in that eternal state. There are hints of what it's going to be like. And these might sound slightly goofy to you, but these are the things that came into my mind as I thought through it, these pointers, these hints of what it's going to be like. Think back to when you were a kid. when you're a kid and it's a beautiful day outside and you go outside, you go into a field and you just maybe like you put your arms up like they're wings and you just start running through the field. You remember that? You just run. You're not chasing anything. You're not going anywhere. All you're doing is just running, and you're feeling the wind at your face. And in those moments, as you are doing that, you feel almost light. You feel weightless. You feel like for all the world, even though you know you cannot fly, that if you just leapt up in the air, you would take flight and just soar in the clouds. And again, in those moments, there's just no cares. It's just this sheer exuberance and exhilaration just at being alive. That to me is a pointer to eternity. This exhilaration, this careless beauty and wonder at just being alive and existing. Think about the experience of awe. What things in this life cause you just to experience awe and wonder? For me, there's many things, but I think about, just going to the beach and standing out on the beach in the sand with my toes grounded in the sand and just looking out at the ocean and realizing that as vast as what I'm looking at looks like to me, that it stretches in every direction. I can't see the end of it. I can't see the right side, the left side, the other side. Can't see any of it. It's just vast. But when I look at how vast it actually looks and then realize that if I were to pinpoint my place on a map, my maps program, and then just pull back out from myself all the way to space, then I'm just seeing just the tip of the iceberg. It's just this tiny, small, little place compared to how vast the ocean actually is. And in the moments like that, as I look at that and think about that, you can't help but experience this awe and wonder at the sheer size of it. But that to me is a hint of something even bigger to come. Or even relationships. Think about the best of your human relationships. Think about the best times with your friends, the best times with your family, the times that you're sitting around the table together and talking, sharing your day, laughing with joy, just sharing that meal together. Think about the joys of, hugs and kisses as you say goodnight. Think about the birthdays, wedding days, graduation days, the birth of a child days. Think about the best of your human relationships and the joy that you share with one another. That is a pointer of something more fulfilling and deeper ahead. Think about the experience of corporate worship, that in the best of times when we come together and everybody is knowing the song, we know the words, we know the tune, and everybody is just singing together loudly, unconcerned with who's beside you or who's listening, and there's just this almost a euphoria and rapture as you're caught up in the worship of the Lord together. To me, when praise fills the room, that is a pointer to what is ahead. It's a taste, but it's just a taste. That's all it is. It's wonderful, but it's a taste. It's enough to make your mouth water for eternity, but it's way short of perfect. Because all of that goodness and that joy and that awe and that wonder and that exuberance, all of that, it can be lost, it can be shattered in this life in just a second. Think about it in your life. When did you stop running in a field just to enjoy the exhilaration of being alive? When did you do that? Probably when you were a kid, right? How many of you still do it now? I'm not talking about running for your health. I'm talking about just running, pretending you can fly, feeling the wind. When did you stop doing that? You get older. You have life that crowds in. You realize you're not going to fly. You realize life is hard. You realize I got some bills to pay. You realize I got relationship issues at my house. You realize I got problems at work. You realize those things. When did you lose that? When did you stop? Now you go out, you run in a field and you go, oh gosh, my hip hurts, my back, my knees hurt, my joints are aching. I'm huffing and puffing. I'm out of breath. I just got to go take a nap. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to enjoy the exuberance of sleep. We lose some of that wonder with time and life. Think about the ocean that you stand and face on the calm, beautiful day and just look, and it's so vast and wonderful. And then imagine you're standing there on the beach and all the water starts launching back in the other direction, and you're like, oh shoot, what's happening? And all of a sudden you're face to face with a 15, 20-foot swell of a tidal wave coming at you. What happens to your awe in that moment? It's still awe, but it's terror. Or your relationships, the joy of good relationships that get shattered with conflict. You know, the birth that ends in death, the marriage that ends in divorce. The joy of that new situation taken from you, or that sweet good night. You know, the hug and the kiss goodnight to the kids. That's all great until the middle of the night when they wake you up again. And you hadn't had a full night's sleep in a month, 2 months. Cammie, I'm not sure if you're there yet, but the rapture of a worship service that is instead replaced with distraction and cares, and you're singing and you're trying to grab on to what we're singing. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me, and you're thinking about what you have to do when you leave church and what's going on at work this week and all the problems that you're facing, and you're not going to have enough time to get it all done, and all of that, the joy that is supposed to exist in this moment as we praise and worship God gets kind of just sort of choked out, broken. Even though there's so much beauty in this world and goodness in this world that points us forward, points us to God's glory, points us forward to eternity and what we have to look forward to, we know that in this life, at the same time as there are those good things, that there is all of this brokenness in this world that is waiting to be put back together again. And that's what eternity's for. Eternity is when everything that is broken gets put back together again. And so the first thing that I want to ask you as we begin to think at eternity is, I wonder, have you been thinking too small about it? Has your thinking been too small? See, up until this point, maybe this is my fault, but up until this point, all I've been talking about is what happens to Christians when they die. And that is a great question, but honestly, it's too small a question. The bigger question is not what is God's plan just for us as Christians, but the bigger question is, what is God's plan for creation, for the whole of creation? Because if God changes us, if God raises us up, if God transforms us into this eternal person, but then leaves us in a world that we're in now, all you have is an eternal person living in a cursed and fallen world. It'd be like, we have two dogs. We have a big dog and a little dog. And the little dog is as cute as he can be. I mean, he's so cute. But he's got these short little stubby squatty legs. Just this little fuzzy little Labradoodle that I am convinced is mixed with something else. I don't know what it's mixed with, but he's got these short little stubby legs. And when we bathe him, he gets so fresh and clean and smells good. We just recently had him, and it's just great. He'd come jump on the bed, and it doesn't stink in there. It doesn't smell like corn chips or whatever. I don't know why he smells like that, but it just smells so fresh, and he's so clean, and there's no dirt, and it's just so soft. And you just want to pet him, and you don't mind just like hugging him and cuddling him, whatever, and that's great. You get him all clean, and that's fine as long as he's in the house. But the second we let him outside again, he's going to take those short little squatty legs and just drag, I don't know, his undercarriage right through the grass and the dirt and whatever else is out there and roll around in it. And guess what happens? He's dirty again, just like that. I mean, it doesn't take long at all for him to go from fresh and clean to dirty. So the point is, how do you stay clean in a dirty world? God transforms us and leaves us in a dirty world. What's going to happen? How do you do that? And the answer is you can't. You can't. We're not fit for that. Or the world won't be fit for that. And so the first thing that I want you to know today is God has an eternal plan, not just for you, Christian, but for all of creation. I think the two best places that you see that are Revelation 21 and 22, and then Romans chapter 8. And we looked a lot at Revelation 21, a little bit of 22 last week, so I want to look at Romans 8 for just a few minutes. And starting in verse 18, I should have told you to turn there, but it is going to be on the screen if you want to turn. Paul says in Romans 8, starting in 18, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us." Listen real carefully what he says here. "For the creation waits." What is the creation in this context? It's not the people. It's the world. It's the universe. It's the stars. It's all the created order. The creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. There is so much in this that we could look at if I were just preaching through this that we could talk about. But just for today, I want you to notice this intimate connection between the fall and restoration of mankind and the fall and restoration of all of creation. That there's this deep connection between those two things. You can say that the world itself fell when Adam fell. That's Genesis 3 stuff right here, that Adam sinned, and God doesn't just put Adam under a curse, but all the world falls under the curse of sin. And so before sin, we know this is all reminder stuff, but the world was this place of harmony, this place of goodness, this place where work was a blessing. How many of you wish work was a blessing right now? You wish it was just a joy and an exhilaration to go to work every day, but work was a blessing. There was no sin, there was no death, there was no natural disaster, there was no predators, prey, whatever. But after sin, what happens? Part of the curse, God says, you're going to work by the sweat of your brow. It's not going to be a blessing in the same way that it was before. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be thorns and thistles in the ground, and you're going to work by the sweat of your brow. And ladies, there's going to be pain in your childbirth, and there's going to be natural disaster that's going to sweep through the earth. There's going to be predators, there's going to be prey, there's going to be sickness, there's going to be death, there's going to be hunger, and ultimately you could sum all of that up the way Paul does here by saying that it became subjected to futility. It all became futile. That's life in a fallen world, that we're born, we grow, we live, we work, we try to make an impact in this life. Maybe we get married, we have friends, maybe we have kids, we raise them, maybe we have grandkids, but one day, whatever it is that we did in this life, whatever, how great it might be, how bad it might be, one day we're all going to die. And there's futility in that. There's futility in knowing that however great an impact you might make, ultimately the end's all the same. It always ends in death. And so what Paul says, that futility, what was God's way of giving creation and even us hope that there is something better ahead. That's it. That the futility is the pointer. It's God's way of showing us that this current world is not the world that God intended it to be. This is not how God created it. It's not a world that is fit for resurrected, glorified people. But Romans 8 says it will be. It will be one day. In fact, Paul says the creation is eagerly waiting for it to become the kind of world that God intended it for it to be again. That it's groaning in the pain of childbirth, longing to be set free, it says, from all that futility and from the corruption that sin brought into it. And so what is the answer to that? What's the answer to the futility? What's the answer to the corruption? When I say corruption, I'm just talking about decay. I'm talking about the way everything breaks down over time. What is the answer to that in the creation? Well, it's the same answer for creation as it is for Christians. It's the resurrection. So what he's showing us is the creation is waiting. It says it's waiting for the sons of God to be revealed. What he's saying, the creation is waiting for our resurrection. Why is creation waiting for our resurrection? Creation is waiting for our resurrection because its resurrection, its renewal, its freedom from corruption and decay is all wrapped up in ours. You could put it like this. An easy way to think about it is the creation will be glorified when we are. When we are. And at that moment, that's when the futility ends. When glorification happens to Christians, glorification happens in this world, then all of the futility is over. That's when the curse is actually lifted. That's when there's no more predator, no more prey, no more natural disaster, no more decay, no more corruption. Everything that death brings into this world is going to be gone. And along with that, this is what I love, not just all the things that bring corruption, but all of the stains and the scars that would be left behind. All of that will be erased. That's Revelation 21 and 22. I love in Revelation 21:5, God says, behold, I am making all things not nice. Behold, I'm making all things not just better. He said, behold, I'm making all things new. New. That's not just new in time, like I got a new pair of pants. It's new in kind. It'll be a recreation. 2 Peter 3, we're going to get to this whenever we get to it in that series. But we're going to get to this. We're going to see Peter talking about the fire of God. And we'll talk about whether that means complete destruction or whether the fire of God is this purifying, refining fire where God sweeps through all of the created universe and just burns out all of the sin, all of the impurity, all of the corruption. At the end of Revelation, it talks about taking death and Hades and casting it into the lake of fire. That death itself gets thrown into the lake of fire so that God can recreate it all new again. But what I want you to see today in this is that there will be a new world. There will be a new earth that is fit for resurrected, glorified people. A world where not only will you not be dirty again, you won't be able to get dirty again. There'll be nothing to stain you, nothing to scar you, nothing but the perfection and the beauty and the joy and the love. And that sounds so wonderful, and we get so cynical, like, oh, well, and that's just warm, fuzzy, whatever. But that is what we have to look forward to. That's what it's heading towards. That's the culmination. And you have to get that in your mind to understand fully that eternal state that we look forward to. And I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I don't know exactly what it's going to be like. I just know it's going to be all the best things of this life, just better. That we'll have the same types of awe. There's just going to be more of it. And not only is there going to be more of that kind of awe that we experience in this life, but it'll be better directed. And I wish I had time for this, but in this life, many times our awe is not directed in the right direction. That our awe is directed at the thing instead of the creator of the thing itself. That we look at the ocean and we marvel at the ocean, but we're not marveling at the God who made it. That we look at the mountains and we're not marveling at the God who made it, but marveling at the mountains. And the eternal state, our glory, our awe is always going to be directed at the creator of the wonder that's in front of us. It'll all be perfectly, intimately connected to God, unstained by sin, unstained by decay and corruption. And I can't imagine that. I know what it's like to look at the ocean. I know what it's like to look at the stars. I know what it's like to look at the mountains. I don't know what it's going to be like to look at all those same types of things with no sin. That's it, though. So everything that would take our breath away is going to take it away then too. But it'll be first and primarily to the glory of God. And all those good things that I said before are pointers to forever. They will all be fulfilling instead of futile. And I think that's the key. That's how I know they're pointers. They're pointers because now they don't ultimately fulfill us. We get a taste of fulfillment when we experience those things, but it's short-lived and it's not forever. But there, all those pointers will find fulfillment instead of futility. All right, so secondly, that's the place. That's what God is doing with this creation, renewing it, removing the stain and curse of sin and everything that it means to be fallen. But what about the people? What about us? What about us? Where do we fit? Well, back in Romans chapter 8, Paul goes on to say, verse 23, and not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons. And listen to what that is. He says, the redemption of our bodies. We are groaning. We are eagerly waiting. We know there's something better ahead that we can taste, that we sense. But man, we ultimately haven't experienced it in all of its perfection, but we are groaning inwardly for it. What does that mean? It means that there is this part of us, that spiritual, that immaterial, that soul, that the inward part of us is looking forward with longing and groaning, almost in pain, waiting for the glorified, resurrected body. That's what we're eagerly waiting for. Not for heaven, even though it's going to be great. I hope I don't have to keep saying this. I feel like I do so that you don't think I'm being heretical or something about it or disrespectful. It's not because it's not great. It'll be great, but it'll be great like an appetizer is great. Right? I love appetizers. I love my cheese sticks. I can eat a whole order of cheese sticks by myself. I love the jalapeno poppers. I love, old school bloomin' onion. I love all that stuff. But I'm not there for that. I'm not there for an appetizer. I'm there for the main course. I'm there for the ribeye. That's what I want. That's what I'm there for. And so if heaven is like this appetizer, then the eternal place is that main course. The eternal state, it's the greatest ribeye. So I'm waiting on that. The redemption of our bodies in this recreated earth. That's the main course. It's what all of God's plan of redemption is ultimately leading us towards. It all comes to that. It comes to the resurrection of the dead. We looked at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 13 through 18 a couple of weeks ago, and we said there that what you see is this is where these two separated aspects of who we are. This is where Jesus returns. And for our purposes, I don't care whether you think that is referring to the rapture or what we might call the second coming. Really makes no difference. A lot of people asked about that this summer. Didn't have time to get into that with this series. But what about the rapture and when is this all going to happen? It really doesn't matter for our purposes one way or the other. When exactly, whether it's a rapture or the second coming itself. The bottom line is that 1 Thessalonians 4 is narrating Jesus coming back and bringing with him the soul or spirits of those who are asleep in him, the dead in Christ. He brings them back, and then out of the ground, out of the sea, out of the earth, God pulls together our bodies, and this is the moment where those are rejoined again, and we become alive in the fullest sense. That's why I said, heaven, we exist. I believe we're conscious, but we're not exactly alive. This will be the moment when we are actually alive in the fullest sense. This is the moment that our spirit and soul are reunited with our bodies. That's resurrection. It's not going to heaven when you die, as good as that's going to be, but it's coming back bodily from the grave. That is the end that we're looking forward to, and you have to get that to understand eternity, to really get a sense of what we have to look forward to, that is resurrection. Physical. And so the question then is, what kind of body will it be? And Paul answers this, and if we had time, we'd get into it a little bit more. But what kind of body are we going to exist in? Because I don't think, maybe it's just me, but I don't think any of us wants to exist forever in this. Do you? God said, you just keep yourself like you are now and move on into eternity, and you can exist forever like that. That'd be nice. God takes away death but leaves you as you are. I don't think anybody wants that. I mean, I'm relatively healthy, moderately young still, but I don't want this. I don't want my inflamed joints. I don't want rickety knees. I don't want scars. I got myself a new one last night trying to steam my shirt. I don't want that. And if I've been dead a while, like most people are going to be when Jesus actually does come back, I don't think I have to paint you that picture. What's waiting when Jesus comes back? If it's been, 2,000 years since I died, is God reuniting me with my skeleton? Is that what it's going to be? Just walking around like a Halloween skeleton? No, absolutely not. It's not going to be like that. We're not reuniting with our skeleton, with our ashes, with our whatever. No, God is going to recreate that old body and make it new. And that's why someone asked the question about burial versus cremation. And I think it's a great question, but I don't get really wrapped up in that beyond a symbolic thing. I think burial is a beautiful Christian symbol. It is that. Just going out into that graveyard, seeing the headstones and knowing that the bodies of those people are in the ground there, and looking forward to that day when the grave will split back open, when the body will be raised from the dead and glorified in that moment. That's a beautiful symbol. It's a beautiful picture. But it's not so we give God more to work with. God doesn't need any help on that. Like, God created everything in the universe out of nothing. He can recreate you out of whatever ashes are left of you. He's not going to come back going, oh, God, this is what they left me with. I'm just going to make do. I'll do the best I can with it, but, no. He can take your ashes and turn them into beauty. He can take whatever's left and turn you into whatever he wants you to be. The Bible talks about it in terms of glorification. That the bodies we inhabit right now are far from anything. If everybody was vocal in here, we'd all get amens. That they are far from anything resembling glorified in the current state. Just not what we are right now. But the glorification is the transforming of this earthly physical body into something that is fit for the new earth that God is recreating. It's the other side of what I talked about earlier. On one side is God glorifies us but puts us in a cursed world. That's not good, right? Well, this is the other side of that. God glorifies the world, but not us. No, we're not fit for that without our own glorification. So God fits us with that eternal kind of body. And this is a whole message to itself. Just understand, much of this is kind of scratching the surface stuff, okay? So every time you preach something like this, people have, 15 other questions that come out of it that we can't get into on a Sunday morning. But the biggest thing that I want you to understand this morning is when we look about what is our glorified body to be like, the biggest thing I want you to see is that Jesus is the prototype. He's the prototype. What's the prototype? It's the first and the model of all the others that are going to come after it. And the Bible talks in the New Testament several different times about how Jesus was raised first to point us to our future resurrection. You see that in Revelation 1:5, calls Jesus the firstborn of the dead. Why call him firstborn? Well, because others are going to follow. He just did it first. Acts 26:23 says Christ is the first to rise from the dead. That would make no sense if there weren't others that would follow after the pattern and model that Jesus sets. 1 Corinthians 15:20, this will make sense here, especially agricultural context. Jesus is raised the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. That Jesus is that initial harvest that points towards the bigger future harvest to come. So if you want to know about your resurrection body, the place to begin, and again, this is just scratch the surface, but the place to begin is looking at Jesus and his resurrection body. That's the place to start. And when you do that, what you see is just like on the new earth, there is going to be some continuity and discontinuity between our current bodies and our resurrected, glorified bodies. There'll be continuity, but there's also going to be discontinuity. There'll be some differences. You look at Jesus. Think about Jesus. Jesus in his resurrected body and his appearances to people, he was somehow the same, but also still somehow different. Think about initially, especially, when some people would see him for the first time, they didn't at first recognize it as him. Think about Mary. She thinks he's the gardener until he calls her name. And when he calls her name, then she recognizes. Think about the two men on the road to Emmaus. They're walking with a resurrected Jesus. They clearly had heard him before. They'd heard him teach. They'd seen him before. But they're walking along and they don't realize they're walking with Jesus. In fact, they're telling him, hey, did you hear that Jesus was killed? You know, we thought we had high hopes for this guy, but he died. And the whole time he's walking with them. And they don't get it until they sit down and Jesus breaks bread and he begins to teach. And then they have recognition. It says their hearts burned within them with this recognition. So there's something slightly different. And I don't know how to attribute that. I don't know if it's that there was something different about Jesus' appearance in that moment. And I don't know if there was something that changes when Jesus ascended to heaven. You know, was there a difference there? I don't know if it was that, or I don't know if it's just the shock of somebody that you know to be dead standing beside you. I think we'd all react a little strange to that. But there was something a little different. There's something a little different. But the cool thing is once they see it, they know. Like once they hear his voice, once he calls their name, once they recognize, man, it's it. They can't help but see it. Then they recognize it to be Jesus. But even though it was different, you know, you think about I think it's in John's gospel, that the disciples are all there in the locked room, and it makes a point to say that they were behind locked doors. And then Jesus just appears in the room somehow. It didn't say he popped into being there. It doesn't exactly say he just went through the door or something. But there's a locked door and Jesus goes in. Maybe he was a good lock picker. I don't know. But there's something different. Something different. There's something different. But at the same time, there's familiarity with him. We think about resurrection. If you think about it as physical, just actual body, touch, taste, feel, sight, hear, all that. If you miss that, you're really missing eternity. Jesus is physical. He's not a ghost. He's not hovering above the ground. He's not translucent where you can see through him. No, he is there in a physical form. He walked. He could be touched. He said, put your hands here. He built fires so he can interact with the world, the physical world around him. He cooked some fish, shared a meal. Jesus wasn't a ghost. He was literally, bodily raised from the dead. And what I want you to see as we finish today is that is what we have to look forward to. That it'll be the same for us. We don't look forward, ultimately, to a disembodied heaven, to floating around on the clouds, strumming harps, singing, in angelic choirs. I don't know, I'm sure we'll sing. We have a hard time with this disembodied heaven. But my whole point today is we can have some idea of what eternity is going to be like through what the scripture teaches, through the pointers that we have in this life, that at that day, when God recreates earth, when he recreates us, oh man, then we'll run again. But guess what? We will run and we won't grow tired. We will run and we will never be weary. I love this. We'll eat, but we'll never be hungry. We just eat for the joy of sharing meals. No hunger. We will love, we will be loved transparently and deeply. You will know people and they will know you and you'll have nothing to hide. How many of you, if somebody could get in your mind right now, oh my goodness, please get out. I don't want you to see what's going on right here. I don't want you to see what's going on right here. No, then we can love, we can be loved, and we'll have nothing to hide. There'll be deep fellowship, deep relationship that all the best in this life, man, it just hints at, right? Even the people closest to you, they can only see what you give them to see. Then it says, we will know fully, even as we are fully known. What a beautiful thing. It's when we face this new creation with awe, but not fear. We can face, the Bible says there's no sea. I don't know if that's metaphoric. I don't know if it's literal. But we can face that new creation and whatever exactly it looks like. And we will be in the deepest awe we've ever experienced. But there'll be no fear. Because it won't ever hurt us. There's no pit to fall into. There's no waves to crash over us. It's when we worship with all the saints. Here's the choir time. But there'll be no distraction, no divisions, no hatred. What will forever be like? Well, people from every nation, every tribe, every tongue. And if it doesn't move you, when you see that, when you experience the nations together worshiping God, then you're going to have a hard time looking forward to forever. And we're going to have full-throated worship of Him in unity and joy and love and splendor. It's when we live, but we never age. It's when we live, but we never break down. It's when we live, but we never die. Go read 1 Corinthians 15. Paul said we're going to be incorruptible, not subject to decay, that we'll be immortal, that we will never die, that we will be unsusceptible to sin, that we will be powerful, that we'll be animated, not by the earth any longer, but by Him, by heaven. And it will be glorious and beautiful and right. It will be all things new. Just like He intended from the very beginning. And as we close this morning, there's tons we could say. But I think I just want to leave it like this. This is what we're waiting on. This is it. This is and always has been the Christian hope. And my purpose in this, what I hope, what I want, my purpose is to stoke your longing for then, to show you that your hunger, it's a pointer to future wholeness, that your pain is a pointer to future perfection, that your awe is a pointer to future glory, that your death is a pointer to future resurrection, and all of that, all of it, it all points us to Jesus Christ, to the one that conquered death. And one day, He already beat death, but one day, Paul said, then will come to pass the saying, death, where is your sting? It's already defeated, but one day the sting's going to be gone. And I long for that day. Heaven will be great. But I long for death and corruption to be gone forever. That's our hope. Is that yours? It's only found in Jesus. The way, the truth, the life, the resurrection, and the life. That if you believe in him, even though you die, yet will you live. You're going to die. If Jesus doesn't come back, you're going to die. One day, I hope a long time from now. Will you be ready? Not just for heaven, but for resurrection. If not, you need to make sure that you are. Maybe today's the day that you need to put your faith in Jesus.